to Storytime with Deb Booker. Appreciate you coming back. Today we're going to continue on with Time Is, the first book of the Time Is series. Last one we visited Pujol, also known as Le Pétomane, which is French for the farter. And that was quite an act. Now, over the course of the books, they go back to see Le Pétomane quite a few times. In fact, that's how you get inducted into the Guild of Travelers eventually. That is the first place that you go to see his act. And over time, because Don's gone there, Honey eventually wants to go to see them. And every time I show a little bit more of the act, so look forward to that. And it's not just Pujol who acted there. They had all sorts of, on the floor, they'd have obviously the can and all that kind of stuff, but they'd also have acts from opera. They'd have high wire acts, people going on unicycles, all sorts of different things, jugglers, you name it, kind of like early vaudeville. So I think it might be interesting for you to stick around and listen to some of the trips that they take to see them. We're going to continue on with their next trip, which is to see the Sphynx. So this is Something Sphinx. By morning, I was thinking back to the time I did a little traveling in the army. I was in Egypt for a bit. I went on a trip to Gaza to see the pyramids and the Sphinx. The area was crowded, filthy, and smelly. The Sphinx was only mildly interesting, as a lion's body and a small head. It seemed ridiculous to be there looking at pyramids and stuff with a Pizza Hut nearby. I wanted to see it in its glory day, or at least when it was painted. Figured Scott would know when that would be, so I just looked up the coordinates and would leave the rest to him. I bought a couple of Western omelets from the diner with all the fixings and hightailed it to the lab. Scott was just waking up and performing his ablutions in the sink when I walked in. I set things out while he finished, and we sat down together. So, did you think of any place and time that would be of interest? I told him what I had decided on and waited. He did some internal considerations. Unfortunately, I don't speak Arabic or Greek, do you? I thought about that. I learned a bit when I was there, enough to find the head and grab some grub, but I don't think I could carry on a lengthy conversation. Hell, I'm not even sure if the Arabic I learned is the same as what they spoke back then. Oops. I sat there while he did some research and finally turned back around. Well, I see no difficulty in doing what you ask. I also feel that what you learn could be of use to us. This will only be a short trip, and we won't be speaking to people much. As to the date, let's try on 250 CE. I recall it was excavated about then and still had much of its pigment. In fact, they were even trying to restore it. This way, you will be able to see it with a minimum of people to encounter. He entered the coordinates, set the arrival for just about sunrise. Fortunately, he had a couple of rolls of linen for covering, or whatever you call those things they wore, and we wrapped them around us. We had to find a book with pictures and to show how to wrap them properly. We placed sandals on our feet and we're ready to go. It never occurred to us just how different we would look when we arrived. I looked nothing like an Egyptian in appearance, and the hair on my back and front accentuated just how different I was. Scott has the kind of face that could be just about any nationality. He's also tall and thin, where I'm shorter and bulkier. As he started entering all the coordinates, he seemed to remember something. He brought out a couple of leather bracelets with minimal decoration. They were a bit thicker than normal and were about 2 inches wide. They had slight bumps that were the control panel with the markings etched into the leather. Each time we visit a new time, we will recreate or create the returns to match the environment and accessories of the period. I was a little concerned if the returns would function if we kept changing them. He agreed and decided to check. I will project you 5 minutes into the future and then you will return. He entered the information, pressed, and I walked through. I walked into the lab from the side door and saw us looking back at me. I tapped my band underneath 6 times and was back at the lab. 4.5 minutes later, I saw myself walk in, hit the return, and vanish. Okay, that was the strangest thing I think that will happen today. All of a sudden, memory caught up, and I now had the memories of being in both places at the same time. He reset the coordinates and we walked through. We appeared around a quarter of a mile off, far enough to be able to see the Sphinx and people around it, but not close enough to be seen in the dusk ourselves. Another thing which hadn't occurred to us is that being a desert, people would work early or late when it was cooler. So we had to figure out what to do. The grounds were covered with fire pits, so a direct approach was not a good idea. I suggested a subtle approach of waiting till they took a break and then mingle when they go back to work. I noticed paint and brushes at the head and feet with no one working them. I thought we should position ourselves at those locations so we could get close enough and not exactly be noticed. Scott told me to hit the return and we would reset, arrival more towards evening. Moments later, we returned, positioned at the feet and almost everyone waking up to come back to work. We merged as best we could, Scott on the scaffold and me at the feet. In the evening light, it was a majestic sight. The face was painted in flesh tones, the eyes had eyeliner, and the scarf covering the head was banded with colors. The body was covered in kind of an off yellow. We set about painting and polishing, following what others were doing. A person I suspected being an overseer walked by me and I thought it was going to challenge me. Luckily, he was called by someone else and walked off. I was busy with paint and brush as was Scott higher up. See, I kept pausing in his work and looking at the face. Something on the nose was annoying him, and he started picking at it with the end of his brush. I went back to my painting and was admiring a plaque between the front feet when I heard Scott curse. Whatever he had found on the nose wasn't coming off and was really starting to bug him. He took a rasp and tried to ground whatever it was off. I climbed up the scaffold and whispered in his ear, "What the hell is bothering you?" He whispered back, "The damn thing has a huge bump of stone on its nose. Looks like the thing's got a zit. It's driving me nuts." I hissed back, "Just leave it. You'll get us in trouble and we can't just pop out in front of all these people." Thankfully, he put the rasp down and went back to painting. After a little over an hour, someone came up with some bread and beer. The bread was flat but tasty, and the beer was very thick. It tasted strongly of barley and was thicker than most soups. We sat down and looked around. There were about 40 people there, and as the evening got darker and the fire started up, we were looking less out of place. About 10 minutes later, a horn blew and everyone went back to work. I heard the rasp, which meant Scott was at the Sphynx pimple again. For God's sake, leave it alone. I tried to shout as quietly as I could. Scott just couldn't let it go. I made a dive for the scaffold as he bent over and picked up a wooden mallet and a metal chisel. Before I could stop him, he hit the zit a mighty whack and the stone went flying. It landed about 2 inches from one of the overseers who was close by. The overseer started walking purposely toward us. "Shit, Scott, get down here now. We have to run for it." I called out, not caring who heard me. Scott made a flying leap off the scaffolding and hit the sand running. He sure could go. It took everything I had to keep up with him. On the air, we heard a grumble of thunder, and suddenly there was shouting behind us. We looked over our shoulders, and everyone back there was grabbing poles and shoving them up the Sphinx's nostrils. Next, a loud bang, and the shattered nose was dropping away. We ran to the nearest dune and slapped the returns as fast as we could. Seconds later, back at the lab, Scott and I were face to face with each other, both as white as a sheet. "Well, we've done it again. First the Globe Theater, now we destroy the Sphinx. Hell, this time it's worse than last time." I was surprised at that. "Why worse?" I asked. He turned on me with a very red face. "Why worse? Because this time I did it. That's why worse." I thought he was going crazy, stomping around with arms flailing. "Hey, calm down. I mean, it had to happen eventually because it did happen, you know." By the way, no one in the history of forever has ever calmed down by being told to calm down, and it didn't happen now. Haven't you noticed that while these things have happened, we were the ones who caused them? He was shouting at the top of his lungs. "Well, it seems like we're just fulfilling history." I told him, in my mind, I thought this was like Quantum Leap in reverse, but I had the sense to keep my thoughts to myself. He was walking around starting to calm down, yet I couldn't help but wonder if he was going to destroy the time machine. "Don, please let's call it a night. I need to think a little bit by myself." He sat down in his captain's chair, placed his feet on the desk, and leaned back. Okay, I said, but promise you won't do anything drastic until I get back tomorrow. Okay, so that's the chapter that we are doing. The next chapter is pretty long. This next one, I'll tell you where we're going. We're going to Philadelphia around 1775. So because it is a longer chapter, we'll save that and do that one complete. So that was their trip to the Sphinx. Next one is going to be 1775 Philadelphia. There's a lot of people that they meet, including Ben Franklin, at a very unusual location. So I look forward to seeing you. I appreciate you coming back. I am really excited that we're doing this again and that going to get back on track with all these books that I've written, as well as if I can find some more friends to read their books, we'll go with that. And maybe I can convince some of the people that we have read from to see if they've got anything new out. I think Joe's Journey, I think she's working on another book, and I know Kent Wayne is. So we might have some new stuff to read from them too. So I look forward to seeing you back here tomorrow. And we'll be reading about their trip to Philadelphia. So hope to see you here. You have a good day, and thanks again for visiting. You can leave now. We're done.